Hello and welcome to another Hand Drink Solo Wine Info video where today we're discussing the very exciting Rebel Colombard made by winemaker Kaylee Hutting. And this bottle is really one of only perhaps 2 or 3 Colombards, if that have ever achieved the heights of a platter 4.5-star award. Admittedly, that is not a 5-star wine just yet. Nevertheless, this bottling represents a rather important historical moment for South African wine history buffs who care to pay attention. But before we get to wine history, you may ask, what the hell is a Colombar?
Yeah, exactly.
What even is that?
It is a grape that is the result of a crossing between Gouais Blanc and Chenin Blanc. And you may follow up this with, well, what the hell is a Gouais Blanc?
That's a great question.
Gouais Blanc is a remarkable, albeit highly promiscuous cultivar that has produced a long string of really famous celebrity children. For starters, Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc had a night of passion and delivered to the world Chardonnay. And these two would hook up many more times, producing cultivars like Aligoté and Gamay Noir, both of which can be absolutely spectacular. Then, amidst one of its other salacious adventures, Gouais would cross paths with Traminer, and the result of that passionate union would be the cultivar of Riesling. So, as I said, a long slew of celebrity children, which is really not bad for a cultivar that seemingly no one wants to drink anymore because it's boring and overly acidic. By the way, if you want to stay up to speed with this sort of wine geek stuff, which includes wine science and wine history and winemaking trends, then subscribe to the Hand Drink Solo YouTube channel because we have almost 400 wine videos on the channel, and give us a like because it helps more people to find our content. So now we know what a Colombar is, we can get back to that important historical moment that I was talking about. And that is that this wine, the Rebel Colombard 2023, has proven that the cultivar of Colombard can deliver some really exceptionally high quality wine. And why is this significant? Well, to answer that question, we kind of need to go back roughly 30 years to when Mulderbosch Estates founder Mike Dobrovich first put Chenin Blanc into a French oak barrel in South Africa in the mid-90s. And you may say, what's the significance of that? Well, in South Africa at least, Chenin was known as nothing more than a grape that was good for distilling and possibly some sweet wine. So when Mike Dobrovich took that Chenin Blanc and put it into an expensive French barrel, people thought he was mad. Why would you waste a barrel on something as humble and as lacking quality as Chenin Blanc? You can't possibly take Chenin seriously. But Mike wasn't too concerned with what other people thought, and soon after he was joined by revolutionaries like Ken Forrester and Martin Maynard, and this gang would eventually trigger the Chenin Blanc revolution, which saw this humble little cultivar, at least as far as South Africans were concerned, transformed into South Africa's most famous and most critically lauded wine category. So how did they do that? Well, the first reason was that South Africa had loads of very old Chenin vines. And the reason they had lots of old Chenin vines was because it was used for distilling. South Africa has an absolutely fantastic brandy industry. They needed all those vines for decades in order to service that. Reason 2 was because, as I said, Mike Dobrovich, Martin Maynard, Ken Forrester, these were some really sharp-minded wine folk who became interested in this cultivar. The third reason that Chenin triumphed was because these people ignored the fact that they were being poo-pooed and knew that they were onto a good thing and eventually pushed through until the rest of the world caught up with the ability to appreciate what they'd known all along. Now, I only tell you about the state of Chenin Blanc 30 years ago because over the last 10 years or so in South Africa, we've noticed, first of all, that there are a heck of a lot of old Colombine vines in South Africa because of the distilling industry. Secondly, some really rather interesting and talented winemakers are starting to pay attention to Colombard as a cultivar. We have Arendse producing a really interesting Colombard to which people said, oh, that's a bit of a novelty, but he has shown no signs of slowing down there. And now we have people like Kaylee Hutting, who is now onto her second vintage of Colombard. Again, not too concerned about what other people might think. The question I have to ask is, will these winemakers persist in the way that Chenin winemakers did 30 years ago? And will Colombard be able to triumph in the same way that Chenin Blanc did? And admittedly, there are 1 or 2 naysayers who've made a good point or two in rebutting this Colombard passion. First of all, 30 years ago already, Chenin Blanc was renowned in the Loire for producing incredible single cultivar wines, whereas Colombard so far has really only been known to produce either brandy or cheap, light floral wines from the southwest of France. But if I were to retort on that retort, I would say that with Chenin Blanc 30 years ago, we started investing in it. And now, today, Citrusdal Mountains have produced Chenin clones that don't exist anywhere else in the world. Swartland winemakers have gotten flavors and textures out of Chenin Blanc that nothing has been able to produce anywhere else in the world. So, is it not possible that the South African wine community and the various terroirs that we have could once again produce a level of quality from Colombar that no one else in the world is capable of? That is why I say we should persist. But rather than continuing with my retorts, let's get into the glass and see what this particular wine has to show us. Now, when we give it a sniff, well, we get layers and layers. We get citrus, mandarin, a kind of lemon sherbet. There's floral, jasmine flower, and it's just super generous. A little bit of sunshine nectarine as well. The aromas on this one are certainly more generous than any of the other South African examples I've encountered so far. But let's give it a sip. Well, this wine is pure pop rock because those fruit elements, those layers of fruit that we smelt are there in spades on the palate. It really is a hugely winsome wine. It's far more generous than my memory perhaps of Kaylee's 2022, which is possibly why I love it so much. But it's generous not for the reasons that I thought. My guess would have been that perhaps she'd harvested it a little bit riper. But as it turns out, this particular wine was fermented by native yeast only. And some of those yeasts are not quite as tough as Saccharomyces. And so the fermentation was a little sluggish and actually came to a close while there was still 4 grams of sugar left in the wine. Now, this is probably about 2 grams more than Kaylee would have wanted. But the end result is absolute sunshine. The sugar acts as a magnifying glass over what are some beautifully concentrated fruit elements. In no way is this wine out of balance. It's got beautiful acidity, and a touch of extra sugar just takes that and actually restores what I think is incredible balance. So the citrus and the stone fruit kept fresh by that amazing natural acidity in the cultivar. And then these are also from 37-year-old vines. So there's concentration. And towards the finish, you get this glorious, almost chalky texture, which really keeps your interest piqued long enough for you to take another sip. And that's really all we can want from an outstanding white wine. I'm very excited about the future of Colombar if winemakers are going to produce what Kaylee has made here. Well, that's all we have time for today, but I have left links to 2 videos, one of which explores Kaylee's Cinsault Méthode Ancestrale under the Rebel label, and the other one explores Gouais Blanc, which is another cultivar that is on the rise amongst some of South Africa's most exciting winemakers.